think it's going next board meeting too, right? I think it's going next board meeting too, right?
I think it was questionable.
Okay.
Good evening. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order and get this party started. To welcome everybody here tonight. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak, they do need to complete a speaker form found at the table in the lobby and turn it in to Kim at the end here. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting during the community comment section of the agenda. Some quick introductions up here at the table with me. We have Superintendent Matt Dagner. We have Directors Lisa Williams, Janet Godwin, to my left, JP Clausen, Charlie Eastham, and Recording Secretary Kim Colvin. So welcome all my colleagues here tonight. Before we get to community comment, our first item on the agenda is our student representative update. So we'll get right in that. Do we have our representative from Liberty? Is Tyler here? All right. Tyler walks in the next 2 minutes, we'll throw him up here. Next on the agenda was Tate High, but I believe our Tate representative couldn't make it tonight, so we can move to West High. Hi.
Hello, respected school board members. I am the West High student representative. Let me start by giving you updates about our sports teams. Our football team won the homecoming game. However, the game was canceled last week due to COVID cases. Our volleyball team is doing excellent. They went 2-0 at a recent tournament in Cedar Rapids, and our swimming team as well as our golf team are also very successful at this moment. The homecoming dance occurred on October 2nd, and it was held at the Green State Family Fieldhouse. Both students and faculty thought of it to be a success, and we had a great turnout. Our 6 Heroes of Troy nominees were announced at homecoming as well. These are Alex Kurtu, Miguel Cohen-Suarez, Hannah Kitamoto, Cameron Reimers, Mason Applegate, and Evan Zukin. We also elected our senior class president and vice president in this past week. They are Bhavan Chesta and Haruni Sumanaseri. Our first issue of the year for West Side Story was also released on the 1st, and it was something students had been looking forward to. As always, I would like to remind you that West High student government is working towards a more equitable and safe environment for all our students, and we appreciate the school board's efforts to assist us with the same. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much. Next up, City High.
Hi, my name is Ayla Bashir, and I'm one of the co-class presidents at City. I guess to start it off, our Student Senate has invited a number of school board and city council candidates to come and sort of like share their policies and goals and talk about themselves. We hope that this will increase voter turnout among high schoolers that can vote, and then also just encourage everyone to be more involved. Our sports teams are doing very well. Volleyball is 18-12. The team captain said that they've shown a lot of improvement, and their first round bye for regionals will be sometime this week, I believe, and then their second round will be held at City next Thursday. Football is 6-1, and senior night is this Friday. Cross country is ranked 3rd, and our marching band received a Division I superior rating at the state competition, and then they took first place in the Muscatine High band competition. Our show choir concert was successful. Homecoming was held 2 weeks ago, and that was also super successful. And yeah, there's a PSAT tomorrow, and I believe Friday, our first issue of the Little Hawk will come out. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up on our agenda is our ICEA update. Brady Shutt.
President Liaison, Director, Superintendent Dagner, thank you all for this opportunity. I'd just like to remind the public that tomorrow early voting starts, and we are, I can say this, we're urging voters to vote yes on the extension and renewal of PEPL and SAVE levies. And so just for the public that's listening or people who follow this online, That's going to be really, critically important to our success on FMP 2.0, and so we are urging the public to go out and vote. You can do early voting starting tomorrow. The Iowa City Education Association has also conducted, as we do each election cycle, our endorsement process. And I'd just like to start off by saying we have excellent candidates, and so I'd like to just thank all 6 of the candidates who are running for the board. It's in many ways a thankless job, and this board has set a very, very high bar, I think, in terms of how boards should operate with the highest levels of decorum and professionalism. So I thank all of you on the board for doing that. Our endorsed candidates for the 4-year seats are J.P. Clausen and Ruthina Malone, our incumbents, and I have to say that they have set an incredibly high bar in terms of our endorsement process. For the other 4-year seat candidates, we have honorable mention recommendations for Krista Burris and Jane Finch. We think both will be outstanding board directors if they are elected, and we really urge the public to get to know them and to see what they're all about. We think they're going to be very strong if they were elected. And then on the 2-year seat, our endorsement goes to Maka Pilcher Hayek. Her vast experience in the district, as well as all of the work the work that she's done, thinking through like FMP 1.0 has just been tremendous. So just thanks to this board, I think you do set. You're fantastic, and that really does come across. And I think that attracts other great people to run, and so we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Brady. That does move us into community comment. A reminder, you will have 4 minutes to speak on your topic. First up, Phil Hemmingway.
Thank you, Phil Hemmingway, 3852 Liberty Drive. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you spend $3.165 million. I couldn't help myself. I didn't come here to speak on the consent agenda, but old habits die hard. I see that we're paying $9,500 for our former fiscal plant director who is no longer here. He's doing consulting. Was it cheaper to keep him? And we $120 for topsoil when we hauled truckload after truckload from Liberty to Cedar County. Don't we have some topsoil here that we don't have to buy it? Anyway, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am honored to see that you left my seat vacant for me to come here tonight. First of the 2 things I came to speak about is the playground policy. And it appears to me that the rubric which was created is not being followed, and it has been modified, which essentially changes the policy. And a great deal of community effort, staff effort, there's a lot, we spent 15 months on it. We hired experts from across the country and locally to work on it. A great deal amount of effort went into creating this rubric, and our objective was to provide playgrounds that not just met the standard but exceeded them, because we are not a minimum standard district, and we want to exceed not just what is required by law, but to make it so it is even more accessible and inclusive on our playgrounds, because we recognize that a lot of learning happens there with our students, and there's a lot of important features to that rubric that if it's not followed, it doesn't meet what the committee put all that effort in and we spent all that money to create. So the 2 questions I have on that is who changed the policy, or when was the policy changed, and who changed it? And I think you need to go back and look at your Twain, which was approved on March 24, Penn, which was March 24, and Lucas, which was April 14, and make sure that they met that rubric and followed the not only the rubric itself, but also the intent and what we created, because we did put a lot into it. And with my last minute, I'll put in a plug for career in tech, and especially ag education. Last week we had the biggest game, well, outside of Alabama, in the nation, and it was our A&F game. And a lot of people go around in A&F t-shirts, but Hayden Fry recognized the importance of agriculture in our state and in our country. And it's important that it not be lost on us as well. The vast majority of people that are going into agriculture now are female and don't come from an ag background. They didn't grow up on farms. And I think we have to look at the examples of Tiffin, Prairie, and all the small towns around us that have those programs, the importance they provide to all students, not just the ones that grow up on farms, but the ones that want to make themselves available to the 25% of jobs in our state and nationally, those opportunities. So again, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Bill. Next up, Joseph Dobrian.
Joseph Dobrian, 1015 2nd Avenue. I call the board's attention to a learning plan published by an organization called Learning for Justice and endorsed by this district in this month's Cultural Diversity and Equity newsletter. The learning plan is titled, "Why Do We Still Celebrate Columbus Day?" The plan's stated objectives are to enable students to, quote, explain the false history that is often taught about Christopher Columbus and why he is celebrated in the United States, and identify reasons Native youth want to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day instead of Columbus Day, end quote. The learning plan proceeds with lengthy, invidious, tendentious instructions, clearly calculated to persuade students to disparage the Columbus Day holiday. The plan concludes by explicitly instructing the teacher to advocate the abolition of Columbus Day. Quote, ask students what they know about how their community celebrates the second Monday in October. If Columbus Day is still recognized by their town city school, ask students to reflect on the following questions. How might that make Indigenous people feel? What could we do to find out if Indigenous people in our community are fighting to have the holiday changed? And if so, how could we amplify their concerns? If there are Indigenous Peoples Day celebrations in your community, or an effort to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, ask students what they could do to support the advocacy of these Native communities, end quote. I was not quite 4 years old when I learned that American Indians existed, and I was fascinated by them. When I first learned to read, all I wanted to study was the history, culture, and lore of the various tribes. I remain a devoted student of that subject to this day. From the start, I was made aware that these peoples had been subject to countless injustices and hardships at the hands of white settlers and their descendants, which, according to contemporary documents, Christopher Columbus tried to prevent. I believe that American Indian heritage is an especially blessed component of our culture, and it deserves celebration. I also believe that the development of the two American continents over just 5 centuries is one of mankind's greatest achievements. It has benefited the entire world in countless ways. Christopher Columbus opened the door to all that, including the birth of the most admired nation in the world, the hope and pride of people of all races and cultures, the United States of America. Christopher Columbus was a hero. Without him, none of us would be here. I urge the board and any students and parents who can hear me to realize that this greatest nation on earth is in mortal peril from organizations such as Learning for Justice and from people in powerful positions in this district that hate America and hope to make your children hate her too. I ask God's blessings on your deliberations. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
Next up, Noah Peterson.
Hello, my name is Noah, and I live in Iowa City. I don't believe in giving my address on these, just for info. Okay. We should not celebrate Christopher Columbus because he was a genocidal, homicidal, colonizing, raping madman that should be despised by history, not celebrated, and called one of our greatest heroes by white supremacists. So yeah, that's why we don't, just to answer the complete nonsense that white supremacists just spewed out here. And second thing I came here to talk about is last meeting the bus drivers came to talk to you about wanting hazard pay. I just want to re-raise their concerns and say that yes, I mean you guys talk about and you do, and I want to applaud you for your efforts for equality and equity and teaching that in our schools, having that in our districts. And to lead and teach by example by doing that, by actually materially helping equality and equity by paying bus drivers more, people who are being taken advantage of, like how they described the two shift thing where they can't do the work. Like that's a very bad situation to be in, and to not have hazard pay on top of that just only compounds the harm that causes.
If you do have a form, you can still turn it in.
Hi, I'm Maka, Pilcher, Hayek, and I live in Iowa City. I've been thinking about what was just said about Christopher Columbus and something else about what we're teaching our students. And what I'm thinking is, I think maybe one of the failures that's become most apparent is that we, my generation and the older generations, didn't receive accurate history. And maybe that's what's leading to this defensiveness and deniability. And it's a great lesson for us because now we see how devastating the consequences are if we don't teach kids accurate history. Christopher Columbus, I was lucky, I was at Notre Dame when the greatest collection of Cristobal Colon and de las Casas and Bartolomeo, all of their original diaries were kept. And I was a Spanish major, so we got to read all of it. It was all in Spanish. And well said by the last speaker, it's absurd to think anything other than that Christopher Columbus was a horrible monster, okay? And it's very clearly depicted in the diaries of everyone that witnessed the genocide that he caused. Again, if we would have received better information when we were kids, when we were in high school, and I was lucky, like I said, I got that in college, maybe we would be able to embrace our history instead of denying it and being defensive about it. And the same goes for teaching our kids about systemic racism, which I believe is what one of the speakers was alluding to. Maybe if he could have learned the lessons that we just want our kids to learn about history and about how racism did affect education, employment, and housing, and continues to affect all of those things, maybe then people my age and people older than I am would be able to accept that as our history and appreciate that it informs everything we do today and informs what we do with our future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We do have one more. Dan Cobble.
Hi, I wasn't sure I was going to speak tonight, so that's why I didn't put my form in at the beginning of the meeting. But to be honest, after hearing Mr. Dobrian's comments about Christopher Columbus being a hero, I was just like, you know what? I've just got to speak my piece. So at the last meeting, I came and I gave you a pretty well-rounded reason why looking at history and other aspects of social studies through a critical race theory perspective is needed. Because, I mean, if you look at the curriculums and all of the everything that makes up these different aspects of social studies, to have a true understanding of the human experience, you have to look at how racism and systemic racism have impacted the world that we live in, okay? And I said that, Mr. Dobrian said his piece. After the meeting, I had to leave early, so I left after public comment along with someone who was sitting with Mr. Dobrian. As I was walking to my car, that person screamed at me, "Critical race theory is effing poison." And he proceeded to shout obscenities at me and said, "My family left this country because of effing communists like you," which, for the record, nothing in what I said indicated that I was a communist. This guy knew nothing about me. But, I mean, my point is, I think these people, the reason why they don't like critical race theory, it has nothing to do with actual facts about social studies. Because, like as the previous speakers have said, the facts about Christopher Columbus indicate he was a very bad guy. I mean, at his direct orders, people were murdered, raped, mutilated. And historical documents back that up. And I think the big reason why people are coming here complaining to you about teaching the realities of systemic racism and their impacts on our society are not because they believe that these things are untrue. It's because whatever their worldview, whatever it's shaped by, they feel the need to come here and try to put down these truths to make themselves feel better about whatever it is what's going on for them. And now, my coworkers listen to a lot of conservative talk radio, okay? I'm not conservative, so it kind of bothers me. One of the things that they've been talking about is how at these school board meetings, there's a huge atmosphere to oppress conservatives, people who don't believe in masks, which, fun fact about the guy who swore me out, someone tried to give him a mask during the meeting, and he refused to acknowledge that they were there. So, weird that these things are connected. Anyways, sorry, I'm totally ad-libbing this, so I forgot where I was going. But my point is, a lot of the comments, so Pete, they're talking about how the school board meetings are having a very hostile atmosphere towards people who oppose these politically correct theories. Well, in my own experience, and I think the experience of a lot of the people who are actually here, it's the opposite. A lot of the hostility, a lot of the racist rhetoric, and just horrible comments are coming from the conservative folks. And so not only are these people trying to change curriculums to things that are untrue and suit their agenda, I just don't know what's going on for them. It's messed up. Sorry, I'm totally ad-libbing, rambling, but thank you so much.
Thank you. That's the end of community comment. We can move into our agenda, and first up is the approval of tonight's agenda. So I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thanks, Kim. Next up is our consent agenda. Did anybody have any questions as they were reviewing the bills this time?
No questions.
I didn't have any.
All right. Are there any items directors would like to pull? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any further conversation? All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you. We can move down. Our next item is policy review. This was one of the policies we were still kind of finishing up on student appearance, so I'd kick it over to Matt.
Yeah, thanks, President Eystone. We had discussed it last week or the week before. Excuse me, I'm kind of forgetting the time frame when we had our last P&G meeting. And then we wanted to do the 2 different readings in front of the board. So this is the student appearance policy. There's some references to where it is designed from. This is some work that's actually been going on for quite some time in the district prior to our current equity directors. And so we wanted to give the board a chance to see it a couple official times there before approval, and happy to answer any questions. We had a couple of typos and errors and citations that we worked to correct between the last P&G meeting and this one, so that would be the highlighted portions or sections you see there in front of you. So more than anything, just kind of an update around the direction we're going, and had a nice discussion around it at P&G.
Yeah, I'd throw it out there to other directors if they had any comments on it.
I actually have a question about a piece of language, Matt, at the very top of the second page, where it says it is also the responsibility of the district to ensure that student attire does not contribute to any bullying, harassment, or shaming that could create a hostile or intimidating atmosphere in any student. My issue with that statement is that the way it's worded, it makes it sound like student attire should not contribute to bullying, like as if the student attire was a cause for bullying. Maybe it was just the way I read it, and I feel like a better wording would be something like it is also the responsibility of the district to ensure that student attire is not the target of bullying, harassment, or shaming. Or, I mean, it just didn't read, it read like attire was a cause or a trigger for bullying, and I just think it read weird to me.
So I read it as you can't wear a T-shirt that is targeting somebody because of their gender or their race in a negative way. So you can bully with your words, but we also
see.
wanted to make sure that you're not bullying with your clothes.
Yeah, I see that. I didn't read it that way when I first read it, but so.
Like if somebody got one of my campaign shirts and said, "is an idiot" underneath, that might make me feel, not to put the ideas out there in the universe, but.
Too late now, man.
We can definitely take another look at that wording too. That's easy. We'd want to make sure it's clear for people that are obviously reading it and trying to implement it or trying to follow it. So if that's a question, we can sure take another go around at that little
Yeah, I
sentence and
just
paragraph
read
there,
it in a
so,
weird way. I
yeah.
totally see what Lisa was saying, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
I agree. When I first read it, it was not quite clear to me what the intent was, but after I read it a couple more times, and I think I saw that it was what Lisa described. But I agree with Janet. It probably could be worded a little bit more clearly, if that's possible. Thanks.
You bet. That'd be easy.
Yeah, I'll just say I appreciate this. I think it a lot of times, in my experience, dress codes just could be used from people in authority. Enforcing that simply just became a distraction. It became about wearing a hat in school and took away from any education. Having said that, I will admit that I went more than a few rounds with my own high school principal about my Mets cap that I used to wear, which says a lot about me right there. But so I am biased there. But again, I just think oftentimes the enforcement of this stuff becomes a huge distraction. And I really appreciate that we've explicitly said if somebody feels that they're distracted by someone else's appearance, that's their problem. They need to work on that. And that puts the onus for behavior back onto the person where it belongs, which is the person exhibiting that behavior. And I think this also really shows that we can trust our kids and their families to make the choices about what they're going to wear in school, and then makes it, the things we cannot wear is to me very no-brainer stuff. Violent images, sexual images, images promoting drugs and alcohol, and those sorts of things. So I appreciate it. I would imagine it is pretty detailed. I think it gives a lot of guidance for folks, and then I would imagine as things percolate up where it isn't very clear, then we can make adjustments as we go. But it's a great place to start, and I really appreciated the references to where this is coming from. The reference to our LGBTQ policy I found really helpful to really outline kind of what we expect from our adults and the way that they should respect students and their experience. And I have to say the video was great, the TV video about consent. As someone who's on the advisor council for the Rape Victims Advocacy Program and RVAP, great way to explain that. And so I think hopefully that hits home for folks and makes it real clear what harassment is and what consent means. So I really appreciated the document and the work that folks put into this.
You're here. I like the enforcement instructions as well. I mean, it's very clear, we're not going to shame students in this process. And so it just, I thought the document was really well done, too.
Yeah, and I really like the bulleted point under the Section 4 dress code enforcement at schools, which says a violation should be treated as minor on the continuum of school rule violations. I've always had a hard time understanding what's the big deal with dress codes anyway. So I really appreciate that, and the fact that this policy includes training for principals and teachers and other staff members, as well as some guidelines on how to do how to do enforcement.
And so next step, we'll take it back to P&G and look at that one sentence and see if we can give it a little more clarity, and along with our next set of, I think 200s, our next set we'll be talking about as well, and so we will bring that back. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our discussion items. The first one up is 21-22 school year. And we have a couple of specific things there, so take it away, Matt.
Yeah, thanks again. I think we have it's a pretty light item for this evening, honestly. So just from a health and safety standpoint, we continue to monitor when that next age group will be eligible for the vaccines, and trying to be ready to communicate information out just as quickly as we can. You saw how we adjusted enrollment periods in consideration of that. We talked you through that component. So we're anxious for that and feel like we keep seeing positive indicators, but we're just ready for it to happen. And I think that would cause a lot of people to feel a lot more assured about some different things as soon as we can get those rolling. We know for staff that we've updated you previously about those that were able to get a booster that were on the through Pfizer. We did have a large number of staff that had received the Moderna vaccine, and we haven't had any new news or updates along those lines. That we continue to have the mask requirement in the schools, as the judge has now ruled in that case. It's been quickly appealed by the state the same day to the 8th Circuit, and so we'll be waiting for any information or any more guidance that comes from that. I've been talking to Joe, our legal counsel, pretty consistently, trying to track any changes or movements there, and so we'll be updating you guys just as soon as we know. And then unfortunately we did have 2 teams on Friday night that we ended up canceling games for because of some positive COVID cases on the West High football team there, and so we paused that activity until today. No new cases over the weekend or really from the time of the last positive case on Tuesday, and so we felt good about resuming those activities this week. So that's kind of our updates around the health and safety. Happy to answer any questions you guys might have or follow-ups to that.
Matt, can we say anything to the students and community about any changes in using face coverings in the district after we implemented a required face covering policy?
Any changes to what, Charlie, about it?
Changes in use of face coverings by students and staff in the district after we went to a more clear requirement to actually have face coverings?
Yeah, I mean, now our approach is universal, right? And so I think we had some pretty respectable rates beforehand of students using face coverings and doing that. It varied by some campuses, but now with that requirement in place, we feel good about how that's been going, and we're working through if we have any issues with families or students, that have questions about the mask requirement or feel like they qualify for an exception of some kind. But I would say, we're treating it as a universal requirement. So outside of those very few exceptions that we offer for medical exceptions and those reasons, it's universal, Charlie. I'm not sure if that was your question or not, but.
Well, it does in part. I was really just trying to get an idea if we can say that the requirement actually has resulted in considerable more kids and staff.
Yeah, I would definitely say. We had some buildings where maybe it was around 50%, right? We're wearing masks, and now we're up close to 95 to 100%, right, with the mask requirement. Just again, depending on some of those medical exceptions, or pretty close to that 100% across the board. But other campuses, you might have seen a rate at 75, 80% before we started the requirement. So again, varied based on campus, but yeah, we've seen more kids, and I think it's reflected in some of our data, right, that you see on the COVID dashboard. Quarantines are going down because we know that now people are masked up, and so we're able to keep them in front of learning, which is a positive. And then also some of those infection rates too have started to come down. So I think those are overall positives for us with that requirement, definitely.
All right, thanks very much.
And then, sorry, can I
Go ahead.
segue? All right, and the second item is labeled esser. It's really kind of a follow-up to some of the community comments we'd had last time around, our transportation services and our bus drivers. We'd heard from the Teamsters, and so I just wanted to let you guys know we're continually looking at that and monitoring what we could do there, and that involves a few different things. We're trying to get some additional guidance on the ESSER funds because of the unique situation surrounding the bus drivers working for Illinois Central, and so how that plays in. So we're working with the state to get clarity around that piece, evaluating what we would maybe need to do from a contractual standpoint if we were going to pursue something like that. Evaluating again the request actually made in comparison to where our other groups are at in some of the other group settlements that we already had. We bargained with 5 different groups, and so it of course impacts just some of that piece and trying to get some better details around their request. I think for us the consideration, as Chase alluded to last time when he was here, was how this would impact other groups and maybe potential requests we would get from some other groups as we consider this conversation and how they'd be impacted. So that kind of ties into the evaluation of the request. But the bottom line is I think we want to continue to engage Illinois Central around this conversation. We know our bus drivers are important and provide an important service to the students in our district. And so I don't have any information, specifics tonight, nor do I think we should necessarily bargain something in public with them. But at the same time, wanted to let you know we are actively engaged internally and we'll be communicating with them very soon around it.
Thanks. I appreciate continuing that conversation. Keep looking at this and seeing what we can do.
Yeah, and I agree with that very much, so.
Anything else?
That's it for that one.
Any lingering questions from directors? All right, let's move to our next discussion items on secondary transfer.
Yeah, this is one that just comes back around to us every so often, right? So we're back around to it here again now, and so Amy's loaded for you on there the secondary voluntary transfer request form that we utilize, and then what I had prepared there for you tonight, we're just kind of dusting off some considerations last January when we looked at this, and I just updated it to today's date, obviously, but some of those considerations are really the same, and so I think we wanted to revisit this. At that time in January, we knew we were beginning a legislative session, and there was some talk around how some of the athletic eligibility would be handled, and if that would impact what we would want to do on a transfer basis. I'm not sure that's as applicable anymore, so I had really removed that as a consideration because for us, with a transfer right now, it does carry an eligibility component wrapped with it, unless it's a bullying and harassment situation to that effect. But really, if you're thinking about secondary transfers, if we wanted to work from that closed concept, which I think where we had some general alignment from the board, would be some of those exceptions around the Kirkwood and Alexander attendance areas. We know just general proximity or history with affiliation to campuses on the west or east side of town, that those would be 2 important areas where we'd want to exert some flexibility and allow some transfers if they were a student that were zoned to those 2 areas. Students receiving special service transfers, so you see the group there, we'd want to consider things for English language learners, special education, and 504 services as a possible exception. I talked about the state of Iowa open enrollment good cause exceptions. The one that's maybe a little tricky in that list, if you see it, would really be the severe health. I think that's one we'd want to be a little bit careful with internally. I wouldn't really reason that there's not a health need we can serve on any of our campuses, so I'm not sure that one necessarily qualifies, but I just tried to list them all there for you so you could see what happens in the open enrollment framework. And then just again, we wouldn't want to consider any implementation in the middle of the school year, so we'd really be looking at trying to align this for the fall. Timeline for us, we really try to have these submitted by that March 1st time frame, so we would want to have something in place and a policy ready to go from the board table so that our team could work towards implementation, give parents and families plenty of notice that we're no longer allowing those transfers, and if there was an exception you felt like you were going to qualify for, we'd really need to see that by March 1st. So other than that, it's kind of, I would say, your guys' opportunity to have conversation. If you want us to come back with additional information or answer any questions, I know Amy and I'd be happy to do so.
I have some notes, but I'll let others jump in first, so.
You know, I don't know if I have any questions. I think this cleans things up. I think it makes it a lot simpler. I do appreciate that carve out for those Kirkwood and Alexander kids, right? You know, I understand what we're doing with assigning those attendance areas where we do, but then I also am very cautious that anything we do to try to make things better for folks doesn't actually make the folks we're trying to help create more obstacles with participation and that sort of a thing. Well, really, it is with participation and engagement. That's my big concern there. And so, I think it cleans things up pretty nicely. And I would hope, we can meet health causes anywhere in any of our buildings. I would imagine, so.
All right, I'll just jump in then. So I have three things here. One's a quick question, I think. With the Kirkwood and Alexander areas, is the exception there for both levels of secondary? So junior high and then high school?
That would be just as far as casting the widest net, and the assumption I made in writing that statement would be that we'd consider it for junior high and high school. If you guys want to have a different lens on that conversation, certainly your prerogative, but I wrote it with the assumption, that it would be considered for the junior high and high school experience, yep.
I guess I could look at is that what it says in because the current one has an exception, right? Like our current
Yeah, we currently
policy?
approve it for both options there, yep.
I don't have strong feelings one way or another. I know that like the Kirkwood and Northwest connection is, it's a much stronger connection, but then once you've gone into one, then staying with your classmates carries on into high school, so I could see why it makes sense farther along. That connection is not going to be made necessarily for anybody else, though, that's on any other exception, right? That's going to be a year-to-year thing, and if they get one in junior high, they're not necessarily going to get one in high school unless, if the circumstances are all the same, they would, right? So thinking on that one a little bit, but I'm okay with it. And then with the starting at the start of next year, right, is what's in there. And it feels very fast, but at the same time, it feels forever ago because we started talking about it a long time ago. So I'm okay with that too. The question I have with that is, have we already received requests for next year that that may or may not change?
In the middle of the year, Sean, like I would say turn of the calendar year, we start to get them. I don't know if we have, maybe sometimes somebody's very planful and tries to submit a request. We certainly wouldn't act on them and approve them at this point in the year. So if we have some, I would say we're sitting on them unless you think I'm wrong in that fact, Amy. Okay.
We haven't told somebody yes that we would then have to go back and say, our bad, it's a no. Because
The only thing we would have said yes to is people we would need to potentially just grandfather through, because we've approved it for their freshman year, to a high school. Well, I would feel like we would need to honor that request instead of going back and stripping those at this point. We'd have to say, this is the start date moving forward. Potentially, probably another consideration then to think about it. And here, the next request you get is, what about the younger sibling that maybe hasn't started, but now my older sibling's in that feeder pattern? So that's another consideration we should probably add to this document that we have to wrestle with.
Okay, you kind of just hit my third question then, was if somebody is a freshman this year and have been approved, are they then now approved the next 3 years?
Yeah, I would not suggest that we would go back and remove those. They would have been approved for that, so they're already working with that assumption that I've been approved for that high school or junior high experience, and so my recommendation would be we'd continue to allow that experience. Our question would need to be then, how do we want to treat younger siblings in that aspect? And then we would start with, we're no longer approving those requests for next year outside of that sibling situation.
Other than that, I think it's something that we really worked hard on at the elementary level, and we kind of have to keep it going at the secondary level. That's where my head's at. So I think kind of working out some of these specifics of it are important, but I think it's definitely the step we need to take, and I'll be glad to have it, in place on this fall. But yeah, you answered all my questions, so.
I think as we consider this, for me, it would be helpful, because it has been a while since we've discussed this, and I'm getting old and can't remember everything. a restatement of the problem we're trying to solve here would help me. Is it because we've got differences between Liberty, where there's no transfers in, and it's different from the other secondary schools? Is it the elementary work that we did was more around equity from a boundary perspective and trying to balance student populations? Is that problem we're trying to solve? I just think, especially if we're thinking about making a change that we need to talk about with our community, we need to be really clear about, this is the reason why we're doing this is what the impact is, just some of the details that you guys were just talking through. Just need to be really crisp on that.
Yep. And I think the next time we bring that back, if there's consensus here at the board table tonight for us to pursue this, we could bring it back in more of a document type form towards implementation. And then I think set with that, we could really talk about, again, those what's the reason for the change, essentially, right? Like, what are the things we're trying to address? And I think there's multiple things on that level a little bit, probably some integrity to, attendance area boundaries, problems we've saw with implementation of this policy, and some of those different components. So I think we'd want to address those, like you said, from the outset. Different campuses having different rules right now is another one I know that's continued to come up in this conversation. So having those outlined, like you said, Janet, would be good importance before we take an action on it.
Yep. I think that'd be great. My inclination when you were saying, is it this or that, my answer was going to be yes. Because I think it's yes, all those things. But yeah, I'd love to see it come back as, as a document that, at some point we're going to go ahead and approve or take a vote on. I shouldn't put words into other people's mouths. My apologies for that. So I think that's good next steps. Are there any other questions tonight from directors on it? Or any things they think is missing there as exceptions or anything like that?
I think we'd be ready to bring that back in the next month, Shauna. We could put it more, probably something more similar to looks like that first document you saw about what our current policy is. We'd put it there, stipulate some of those reasons, and then that would give us some nice timing as we approach the turn of the calendar year to move towards implementation if that continues to be the desire of you guys. So, yep.
Sound good? Yep. All right. Thank you, Matt. We're moving quick. Move on down to our Director Liaison report. Any things that folks would like to highlight there?
I did want to highlight one of the things that I did was to attend the first farm to school curriculum planning team meeting on October 5th. And I don't think this has gotten a lot of attention in the community, but it's really some exciting stuff. The Iowa Valley RC&D received a grant from the USDA to work on some ag programming with the ICCSD. And the goal, the grant funds are to be used to develop a farm-based education curriculum centered on marginalized students in Iowa. They're targeting our BIPOC students, but also bringing ag to them. And the curriculum development team is working on hopefully rolling out some stuff in the spring of 2022. So this coming spring, targeted towards our secondary students. And it's just a really cool project. It's hoping to use some of the space that they have out at the Poor Farm. They have a 5-acre organic vegetable farm out there, and really kind of melding together some practical ag, continuing CTE training with our schools. So it's exciting. The first planning meeting went great. They've got a whole great group of people working on this. I'm really excited to see what happens.
Very cool.
Sean, if you don't mind, I'd just like to comment on a couple of things I've been involved in. And that is I have a couple of notes here about having attended meetings of the Forestview Tenants Association, which is a group I've been involved with since 2016. And their principal work is to try to obtain a better housing conditions for the entire community there in Forestview, as that surrounding area is slated for larger commercial development. And the Tenants is association, I'm sure some of you know, has actually developed a very comprehensive housing plan that they're trying to continue to get implemented. But one of the issues is that housing in the mobile home park has gotten to the stage where some people cannot maintain their residency there in their mobile homes, and they are some of them are seeking to go to another mobile home. The city's zoning requirements have been implemented in such a way that residents who move now from actually the last several months to another place have a right to buy housing in that new neighborhood if it's developed in the future, which means that they're moving their family from one school attendance area where they've been attending for a long time, in the southeastern city, and to another place. And they're interested in trying to be able to maintain their school community by attending Man. And they've asked for help from the district to achieve those transfers. And I would like to say that it's my understanding that the principal of Man has been very, very helpful to individual families and towards that end. But also I would, at some point, we're going to be asked to, if the mobile home park residents move from where they are now to actually a couple of blocks west to a new neighborhood, they will have changed attendance areas as the attendance areas are currently, as they stand currently. And when that eventually happens, we will be asked to change the attendance area of the new Forestview neighborhood to probably to maintain it, to maintain their attendance at Man. That's that's a ways in the future yet, and we're not quite sure, how that'll come about. But I just I think it's a good idea, that you as board members are at least aware that that's something to consider as we go along here. So thanks.
Thanks, Charlie. Anything else directors would like to point out? All right, let's go ahead and move into our agenda setting. We do have, ahead of our next board meeting, we do have another Policy and Governance Committee meeting. I was going to ask our alternate, which is Director Williams, if she would be available to join us, as Director Etsy is not with us.
Man, when I signed up for alternate, I thought that was a fake thing.
A fake thing?
No, I'll be happy to be there.
All right, that would be great. Cam, we just need to make sure we put on there the 502.1 that we just talked about, at least the one sentence, right, that we need to update. But there were a couple edits that we had in the 100 series when we met last time, and so we'll go over those, and then we'll tackle the 200s as well at that meeting. And then the main board meeting on the 26th has all of our usual stuff on it and nothing extra on there. Do we want to, I guess maybe we'll wait on the secondary stuff until the November meeting? Or do you want it that quick?
I think the November meeting now, Kershawn, in case we try to do some data pulls too with it, just to kind of speak to Janet's point about reminding, some of the problems and the problem we're trying to solve type of thing. So I think November for that. Do you have FMP 2.0 on there as a discussion item? If not, could I ask that we include that?
Not on there, but it certainly can be.
Previous to the vote.
Any other items directors would like to see added on the 26th or later, for that matter?
Sean, I don't necessarily want to add an item, but for the equity update, Matt, I think we're far enough along in this year that we can get some data on disproportionality of what our experience is so far this year.
Yeah, and if we don't have something for next meeting, Charlie will definitely do it the one after, but we'll work with the team. I know we'd kind of talked about that previously, so we'll see what we can do for some kind of data updates through the first trimester. The trimester might be a good time to look at it, but we'll see what we have ready or what's included now. So I know we need to get to some more frequent reporting of that. So.
And, along with that data, I'd love to hear, and maybe it's too soon in the school year, but I'd like to hear how the restorative justice ambassadors, kind of how that's going, and how they're, you know, working with teachers. And again, that's going to be some anecdotal stuff, but I think it'd be nice to hear, since we have that position and we got a bunch of folks hired there, just maybe for the board to understand what that looks like, you know, and how it's going.
Yep. And it should be our meeting to do the equity update, so we'll probably just try to house those right under the equity update, both of those pieces you guys just talked about.
And could we have something about the care assessment team experience so far? I don't know if they've, I assume that teams are established and are meeting and working. So I think it'd be a good idea to let us know what their you know, what their work is, who they've seen, so forth.
Yep, can do that too.
All right, I'm scribbling notes, so awkward silence. Anything else? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
It's a little early, but okay, I'll second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you everyone for your time.